By late 1943, the war on the Eastern Front had changed. Front lines were no longer clean. Cities were broken into pieces. Small units were often left to hold positions with limited information and almost no margin for error. This story takes place on the outskirts of a damaged industrial town, not a major city, just warehouses, rail lines, half-collapsed buildings, and empty streets filled with debris. A small German unit had been moved there to secure a supply corridor. Their task was simple: hold the area, watch the roads, and be ready to move if needed. They had already been there for several days. Nothing unusual had happened. No contact, no shots, no visible enemy movement. That silence slowly changed how they thought. Late in the afternoon, a warning arrived. It was short, unclear, passed through several hands before reaching the unit commander. The message did not say exactly where. It did not say when. It only suggested that enemy elements might be moving nearby. The commander read it more than once. He did not ignore it. But he also did not treat it as urgent. There were reasons for that. They had received similar messages before. Most of them led to nothing. False alarms were common at this stage of the war. The town itself looked quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But quiet had become normal. The commander made a decision. They would stay in position until clearer information arrived. Extra lookouts were posted. Patrols were told to remain alert. But there was no order to withdraw or reposition. Time passed. The sun dropped lower behind the broken buildings. Long shadows stretched across the streets and rail yard. Some soldiers began preparing for the night. Others checked weapons or smoked in doorways. Then a second message arrived. This one was even shorter, and it arrived late. It confirmed movement. Closer than expected, but still without clear direction. By the time the commander finished reading it, the situation had already changed. The warning had come, but the moment to act on it was slipping away. And no one in the unit fully realized how little time they had left. A few soldiers noticed the tension before anyone spoke about it, the kind that comes not from noise but from the absence of it. The streets remained empty. No civilians. No movement near the rail line. Even the usual distant sounds of fighting were missing. That silence should have meant something, but silence had lied to them before. The commander stood for a moment, weighing whether to act now or wait a little longer. He chose to wait. And with that choice, the unit unknowingly crossed the point where small decisions could still change what was coming next. As evening approached, the town began to change. Shadows deepened between the damaged buildings. The rail yard grew darker first, its twisted metal and broken cars forming narrow corridors of cover. The unit increased patrols. Small groups moved through side streets and along the tracks, checking corners, listening, stopping often. Still nothing. No movement. No sound of engines. No footsteps. For some, this confirmed the commander's decision. If something was coming, surely they would have seen it by now. But others felt the opposite. One patrol reported signs that did not belong there. Fresh marks near a warehouse entrance, disturbed debris on a stairwell, footprints that did not match the unit's own. The report reached the commander quickly. He listened. He asked questions. But again, there was no clear picture. The problem was timing. If the warning had come earlier, they might have pulled back or repositioned. If it had come later, the danger would have been obvious. Instead, it arrived in between, the worst moment possible. The commander ordered the patrols to stay alert, but return before dark. He did not want units spread too thin in unfamiliar streets. As the last patrol moved back toward the main position, the first real sign appeared. A distant metallic sound echoed from the rail line. Short, sharp, then silence again. Some thought it was loose debris. Others assumed it was old equipment shifting in the wind. No one reacted immediately. Minutes later, a second sound followed, closer this time. That was when the commander realized the warning was no longer theoretical. Orders were given to prepare defensive positions. Weapons were checked. Men moved to windows, doorways, and rubble piles. But the unit was reacting, not anticipating. The enemy had already reached the edge of the area. The first shots came suddenly. Not loud, chaotic fire, but controlled bursts from multiple directions. One sentry went down before he could shout a warning. Another returned fire blindly, unsure where the shots were coming from. Confusion spread fast. The town that had seemed empty moments before now felt crowded with threats. The commander tried to reorganize the defense, but communication broke down almost immediately. Shadows hid movement. Echoes distorted direction. The warning had been real. That much was now clear. What was unclear was whether the unit still had enough time to escape the situation it had stepped into. Once the shooting started, there was no clean way out. The unit tried to pull back toward the rail yard, hoping to regroup and find a clearer line of retreat. But the enemy pressure increased instead of easing. Fire came from angles they had not expected: upper floors, side alleys, gaps between ruined buildings they had passed earlier without noticing. The warning suddenly made sense, but understanding it now changed nothing. Several soldiers were hit within the first minutes, not killed outright, but wounded badly enough to slow any movement. Every attempt to move them drew more fire. The commander tried to shift positions, but the streets worked against him. Each order took longer to pass. Each movement exposed another blind spot. Smoke began to fill the area as debris caught fire. Visibility dropped even further. At one point, a small group managed to break away toward the edge of the town. They believed they had found an opening. It was another mistake. The route had already been cut off. What followed was not a dramatic last stand. It was confusion, short bursts of fire, shouted warnings that arrived seconds too late. By the time the shooting faded, the unit no longer existed as an organized force. Some were killed, others were captured. A few escaped, carrying fragments of what had happened. Later reports would describe the event briefly: a failed position, a loss caused by delayed reaction. No mention of the warning that came too late. No record of the moment when a different decision might have changed the outcome. Just another entry among many in a war where timing mattered as much as strength, and where hesitation, even for understandable reasons, often carried the highest cost. In the days that followed, the incident did not stand out at first. On paper, it looked ordinary. A unit lost contact, supplies disrupted, a position abandoned. Similar reports arrived every day by late 1943. But for those who later studied what happened, one detail kept returning: the warning. It had not been ignored. It had not been dismissed. It had simply arrived at the wrong moment and was treated accordingly. The commander's decision was not reckless. It was cautious in its own way. He tried to balance limited information against the risk of unnecessary movement. That balance failed. In urban combat, hesitation often costs more than aggression. Staying still gives the enemy time to prepare. Time was exactly what they did not have. Survivors would later describe the same feeling: a sense that the situation had shifted before anyone could fully grasp it. They remembered the quiet streets, the empty rail yard, the moment when everything still seemed manageable. By the time the danger became obvious, options were already gone. The enemy had chosen the place. They had chosen the timing. They had waited for the unit to commit to staying. What followed was not the result of a single bad order, but of a delay measured in minutes. After the war, events like this were often reduced to simple explanations: poor coordination, lack of intelligence, bad luck. The warning itself rarely appeared in summaries, and yet it mattered. It showed how modern warfare punished indecision as much as mistakes, how information that arrives too late can be as dangerous as no information at all. There was no dramatic lesson drawn from this incident at the time. No official change in doctrine, no recognition for those who acted under pressure. It disappeared into the larger story of a front that was already collapsing under its own weight. But for the few who survived, the lesson remained clear. Not every warning saves lives. Some arrive only to show what might have been avoided. And in war, the difference between reacting and acting is often measured in seconds. Seconds that once lost never return.